started. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The human body, not just the human body, but all animals have a rhythm that has to do with the 24-hour clock, with the fact that each day is 24 hours long. Some animals are awake in the daytime, some animals are awake at night. Those animals that are awake in the daytime are called diurnal, and those individuals that are only awake, that are awake at night, are called nocturnal. Mice, most rodents are nocturnal, not squirrels, not rabbits, I guess, but mice and rats are nocturnal. If you've ever been to Texas and run into an armadillo, armadillos are nocturnal, possums are nocturnal, raccoons are nocturnal. So during the day, of course, those animals are primarily asleep someplace, if they can find someplace to sleep. And of course, you do tree them and find them at night. I'm sorry, I need to make that bigger. Okay, yeah. And we know that by looking at all this stuff, we know that it's all controlled by hormonal structure of the select individual. So the one question can be, or should be, why are humans nocturnal? Why are we diurnal? I'm sorry. Why aren't we nocturnal? And the answer is because there were predators out at night. Lions hunt at night very frequently. The large cats hunt at night, and for that reason, we would hold up at night and try to protect ourselves. So we had to find some place to sleep. And for that reason, of course, we have a cortisol surge in the evening, about the time when we are looking for some place to sleep. So we have a cortisol surge at that point, and then later on, 3 or 4 hours later, we go to sleep. We have another cortisol surge in the morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning. And the reason we have that surge is because we need to wake up and find food. So as humans are very much animals, and we are diurnal. We hunt for food during the day and we sleep at night. Other animals, of course, don't. There are external cues that we have, and this is known as free running. It helps us maintain our cycle. So sunlight, of course, the color of the sun is a cue as to what time it is. Probably, if you spend a lot of time outside, you can tell the time. You can tell time by where the sun is in the sky, what color it is. You can tell what time of year it is by where the sun comes up, whether it comes up farther north or farther south. In the wintertime, the sun shifts to the south, and it's shifting right now here. So it's rising farther and farther south. And eventually, of course, around the 21st of December, it will rise at its farthest point to the south. And then it will start migrating its way north again until it's rising directly from the east. And we know that. We know that naturally, or this is a cue for us, and this has to do with free running. I told you the story about being trapped in a cave, not really trapped, but we were practicing bugging out. So we were in a cave, and we were in that cave for about 10 days. Cold, oh my God, it was so cold. The temperature never changed. It was like 53 degrees all the time. You can imagine how horrible that is. Of course, there's no wind, but at the same time, it gets into your bones. I mean, so everybody was freezing to death. That was one of the problems. The other problem was that we had all artificial light, and they never turned off the lights. They didn't turn off the lights at night because it was completely dark, and people would there was no, this is back in the 70s, so we didn't have all this electronic equipment. You know, I've got a Fitbit, and I can walk around in my house at night just by turning on that thing. I mean, and you would think that that's not very much light, but in absolute darkness, it's a lot of light, actually. So that was one of the problems. The other problem that they had was they didn't give us flashlights. What they needed to do is give us, but they didn't. And it was kind of dark in there. Well, it was very dark in there. We had all these yellow incandescent lights. Anyway, by about the time we left, we thought it was one time, and of course it was some other time. We lost about an hour every day. So we were about 10 hours behind when we were about 10 hours behind when we left the cave, and everybody was shocked because we thought it was early in the morning, and it was evening. So we were all way behind in our brain. It was like jet lag. We were all kind of walking or stumbling around because we didn't know what time it was. Any cue that you use, and usually sunlight is a good cue. Cue that you use is known as Zeitgeber, and Zeitgeber means time giver in German. And so those are the cues that we use. Once upon a time, when I was young, I went out into the woods with a friend of mine, and he got mad at me for one reason or another, and he took off. It was his woods, and I'd never been in this woods before. So I had to orient myself. Well, I was okay, except the problem was that there was a storm moving in, and the storm covered the sun. And the storm was coming in from the west. Yeah, it was coming in from the west. So it covered the sun, and so half of the sky was dark, and the other half of the sky was light. So it made it look like the sun was in the east instead of the sun was in the west. So I got all turned around. Does that make sense? You see what I'm talking about? Okay. So I became disoriented. I thought east was west and west was east. So I started walking. I knew where my house was, and I knew where his house was. I was actually trying to head to his house. So I thought I was headed south, where his house was, and I was actually headed north, where nobody's house was. Anyway, so, and it was really strange because the sky, you know, this is evening, and the sky was all pink, and the light was over in the east, and it was dark to the west. But it was really kind of surreal, actually. It was really kind of an odd situation. So I became disoriented because the sunlight was in the wrong place, because it was bright in the wrong direction. And for that reason, I got lost. And they started looking for me because, well, this was a large section of woods that was about 30 or 40 acres. And it was really easy to get lost in here. They hunted a lot in this woods. So it was really easy to get lost. But I was smart enough that I went to a fence, and then I just followed the fence down because, well, I figured the fence went down to the road, and that's exactly what happened. So I ended up on the road, and once I got on the road, I recognized where I was, and I headed home. So I found myself. In essence, I found myself, but everybody was looking for me. They thought I was lost and dying. Instead, I was having a great time. But my brothers and sisters still make fun of me for getting lost. I don't think of myself as being lost. Anyway, so I became disoriented, and it's relatively easy. Researchers have discovered that a small region in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus serves as the circadian oscillator. So it's in your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus is right behind your eyes. And as you can see, well, here's your eyes right here, and there is a suprachiasmatic nucleus. So it's gaining all that information. It gets cues from sunlight, how much sunlight there is. If you're in a room like this, where we have both white lights and there's yellow lights back there, but these are all white lights. White light is the color of the sun in the summertime. So that can be disorienting. If we spend a lot of time in this room rather than, and we didn't ever go outside, then potentially you would think that it was summer all the time. Even people that live in places like Phoenix, where it's really hot in the summertime and not that hot in the wintertime, it's fairly comfortable in the wintertime. They know when it's summer and they know when it's winter because of the color of the light. So despite the fact that you're not even thinking about it, you know that we're moving into fall because the light is turning yellower and yellower and yellower every day. So if you go out at noon, it's kind of yellow. It's turning yellow. It's not quite there yet. It won't really get there until this month, November, and then into December, and it gets really, really yellow about that time. The suprachiasmatic nucleus triggers metabolic activity, and of course, since most of our metabolism takes place at night, we need to know when to maintain our body structures, our organs of our body. And that takes place, of course, when we're asleep. Lesions of the suprachiasmatic nucleus abolish free-running rhythms. Activity in suprachiasmatic nucleus correlates with circadian rhythms. If you get an abscess on your, or a lesion on your suprachiasmatic nucleus, one of the things that will happen is you'll have a difficult time knowing when to go to sleep. So it's like a 5-year-old kid. You know, you can't make them go to sleep because they want to stay up all night. And then you can't wake them up in the morning because they don't want to get up to go to school or kindergarten or wherever they're going. And it's like their suprachiasmatic nucleus has a lesion on it. But the reality is it doesn't, of course. They're just kids, and they have a select amount of energy, and they want to burn out all that energy before they go to bed. And sometimes they haven't done that. This is especially true of kindergarten kids because they're not really used to school. And because they're not used to school, they're not used to sitting. They're used to burning off all that energy throughout the day by playing. A lot of times they will have a problem going to bed at night because they haven't burned off as much energy as they're used to burning off. Isolated suprachiasmatic nucleus continues to cycle, of course. Transplanted suprachiasmatic nucleus imparts rhythm of the donor. So if you are well, we've done this with rats and pigeons, as odd as that seems. But it's anybody that's nocturnal, of course, where they transplant the suprachiasmatic nucleus of an individual that's diurnal, they will suddenly become diurnal rather than nocturnal. We normally produce different intensities of electricity in our brain. While we are awake, we produce short, rapid waves. I'll tell you what, I've got a video. Let me go to the video, and I'll show you the video, and then I'll talk about this stuff. He's going to talk about gamma rays, waves, and the reality is, he's Australian, and in Australia they recognize gamma waves. We don't in the United States. So he's going to talk about gamma waves, but he's actually talking about beta waves. We got no noise, do we?
Try the one in the corner.
It's here?
Yeah.
You know who does that? I think it must be
The electroencephalogram EEG measures brain waves at different frequencies within the brain. Waves can overlap stages.
There's 2 videos of them.
Brain waves are measured in size
Oh, there we go. Let's try it again. Let's try it, and we'll only get one voice.
Go up.
You want to study website? I've already done it with weeks. I'll show you how it's done.
There.
I'm gonna need to put these back.
So we got 2.
Human brain waves, part 2 of the biopsychological effects of ascension by Danny Searle. The brain has its own set of electrical frequencies it uses to communicate with itself and the rest of the body. The electroencephalograph, or EEG, measures brain waves at different frequencies within the brain.
That's not loud.
Waves can overlap
Is that okay?
merging seamlessly into one another. Brain waves methods are measured in cycles per second, or hertz. Raw EEG frequencies include gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. These frequencies are linked to behaviours, subjective feeling states, and psychological correlates. The frequency bands and waves characteristics are described as follows. Gamma waves, 25 to 60 Hz. Gamma waves relate to simultaneous processing of information from different brain areas. They are involved in memory, learning abilities, integrated thoughts, or information task processing. Gamma rhythms modulate perception and consciousness, which disappear with anesthesia. Beta waves, 12 to 25 Hz. Beta waves dominate our normal waking state of consciousness when attention is directed towards cognitive tasks and the outside world. Beta is the fast activity, present when we are alert or even anxious, or when engaged in problem solving, judgment, decision making, information processing, mental activity, and focus. Alpha waves, 7 to 12 Hz. Alpha waves are triggered during dreaming and light meditation when the eyes are closed. As more and more neurons are recruited to this frequency, alpha waves cycle globally across the whole cortex. This induces deep relaxation. In alpha, we begin to access the wealth of creativity that lies just below our conscious awareness. It is the gateway, the entry point that leads to deeper states of consciousness. Alpha waves aid overall mental coordination, calmness, alertness, inner awareness, mind-body integration, and learning. Alpha is the home of Schumann's resonance, 7.83 Hz. When you intentionally generate alpha waves,
Schumann's resonance is there are electrical impulses coming out of the Earth, and the electrical impulses are at 7.83 Hertz. Okay, so what he's talking about is as you start to go to sleep, you pass through the 7.83 Hertz area. So if you can maintain that, and this is what people that are meditating try to do, they try to relax their bodies and relax their minds. They're trying to get down to Schumann's resonance, is what he's talking about. Okay? All right. Yeah, Schumann's resonance.
we go into resonance with the Earth's frequency. We naturally feel better, refreshed, in tune, and in sync. In fact, it's environmental synchronization. That is why you feel relaxed and at peace when you're in the country or on a secluded beach. Your brain is resonating with the Earth. Theta waves, 4 to 7 Hz. Theta waves occur most often in sleep, but also dominant in the deeper states of meditation. In theta, our senses are withdrawn from the external world and focused on the mindscape, internally originating signals. Theta meditation. Theta waves are associated with mystery. It is that twilight state which we normally only experience fleetingly as we rise from the depths of delta upon waking or drifting off to sleep. Theta meditation increases creativity, enhances learning, reduces stress, and awakens intuition and other extrasensory perception skills. Delta waves, 0 to 4 Hz. Delta waves are the slowest but highest in amplitude. They are generated in the deepest meditation and dreamless sleep. Delta waves confer a suspension of external existence and provide the most profound feelings of peace. In addition, Certain frequencies within the delta range trigger the release of a growth hormone, which is beneficial for the healing and regeneration process. This is why deep, restorative sleep is so essential in the healing process. Brainwaves affect the way we feel, our health, and our ability to learn. Alpha waves induce feelings of peace and harmony, and just happen to be the same frequencies as Schumann's resonance. This is no coincidence. After all, our brains did evolve on this planet.
Sorry, he gets kind of BSy right there toward the end. Okay. Anyway, he talked about all the ways. As I said, in the United States, we don't really recognize gamma. We don't even talk about gamma waves. As a matter of fact, what we talk about being awake is beta waves instead of gamma waves. He's talking about learning. You put off gamma waves, but in the United States, we don't recognize gamma waves. That's a British thing. We normally produce different intensities of electricity, of course, and the most intense are called beta waves. The reason they're called beta waves is because they're so short and fast acting. This is your beta waves. As you start to go to sleep, the waves become longer. They start spreading out. So this is the beta wave stage, and this is the alpha wave stage. Alpha waves, you're still awake when you're putting off alpha waves. You're thinking about going to sleep, or your brain is more relaxed, and as you can see, it's less intense than the beta waves. One of the things we do know is that if you can get into a meditative state into the alpha waves, and you're an athlete, then potentially you will perform better. When somebody is on, when a basketball player is on, when he's in the zone, what he refers to as in the zone. Normally, if we took what would happen if we took an EEG at that time, we would see that he's putting off alpha waves, and everything is automatic. So instead of overthinking everything, he's allowing his body, the muscle memory, to take hold. And of course, people that score, 30 or 40 points. 50, 100 points, as far as Chamberlain is concerned. If you score a lot of points, usually it's because you're shooting very, very well, and you're not missing very much. And usually that has to do with the fact that you're putting off alpha waves. Golfers will do the same thing. Golfers will try to get into a meditative state before they start playing, and that allows them to grip, not to overgrip the club. And if they're over-gripping the club, of course, they're more likely to not hit the ball in the center of the strike zone on the club. And if they hit it off center, they'll curve the ball to the right or curve the ball to the left, depending on where they hit it. Okay, so alpha waves are kind of a drowsy state. It's a relaxed state. Actually, it's more relaxed. And that's what we're looking for, of course. So one of the things that you do if you're a sports psychologist is you try to train people to relax in a serious situation and just allow muscle memory to take over. That's how hitters do it in baseball. That's how basketball players do it. Soccer players, of course. One of the things you'll see them do, they've been playing a very intense game. One of the things you'll see them do before they strike a penalty kick or any kind of a free kick is that they will take a couple deep breaths and they'll just kind of stand there and try to relax. And you'll see their shoulders actually dipping when they're trying to relax rather than, they're all tensed up. In stage 1 of sleep, we begin producing theta waves. In stage 2 of sleep, we produce theta waves with sleep spindles. If you've ever fallen asleep in class, and I know you guys have never fallen asleep in this class, however, there are more boring professors out there where you will go to sleep. This is a sleep spindle right here. If you've ever gone to sleep in class, sometimes you feel like you had a whole dream when you wake up. And there will be a certain word, the last word that you said will be on your mind. It's so weird. I fall asleep in my office from time to time, and I'll wake up and I'll be saying George, or, you know, bullet or something, you know, and it'll be the last word, and you'll just keep saying that last phrase, whatever that last phrase is. Anyway, that's a sleep spindle. This lasts for 2 or 3 seconds, and as you can see, there's a lot of activity going on, and what's going on in your mind is you're cramming all of this information into a very quick and rapid situation, and that's a sleep spindle. So it's like a little capsule of dreams that you go through. It's really kind of exciting, I guess. What was I doing? I was taking a class. It was a history class, and what happened was I was working in the morning. I was going to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was drawing blood all morning until like 8 o'clock, and then I had a class at 8 o'clock. It was an 8 to 9 class. So I was tired. You can imagine I'd already worked for 4 hours. And here I was going to class, and I go to sleep in class. And I can remember, and of course if you're taking notes, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but as you're taking notes, sometimes you kind of lose your ability to write, so you're writing down the page. It's really kind of bizarre. Anyway, that's a sleep spindle. And they're little capsules of dreams that you have. And they're very rapid, and they feel like they're complete, because when you have a dream, you get the environment is there, and you understand what the environment is, and there's sometimes things that happen. Well, sometimes these are usually memories of what happened, but if you wake up, you feel like you dreamed about the entire thing, because you set the stage for a real dream. So it feels like you've been asleep for like 5 or 6 or 10 minutes and been dreaming the whole time, but the reality is it's only 1 or 2 seconds. As amazing as your mind is. In stage 3 sleep, delta waves will first appear. Delta waves have to do with these really long electrical impulses. And as you can see, there's a lot of width in here. So there's a lot of relaxation that's taking place. So delta waves are the longest waves. During delta wave sleep is when you are repairing your body. The human body repairs itself at night. This is one of the reasons why, if you are sleep deprived, that your body will start breaking down. So one of the things that of course, you need to repair it from the inside. So one of the things you need to do is be sure to go into delta wave sleep. One of the ways that we torture people to get them to disclose information that they don't want to disclose is sleep deprivation. We will allow them to go into stage 1 and stage 2 sleep, and as soon as they start drifting into stage 3 sleep, we wake them up. So they aren't able to repair themselves, and it's not very restful sleep. So we just allow them to go into stage 1 and stage 2 sleep patterns. And we certainly don't allow them to go into REM. And as we're going to see with rapid eye movement, with the last stage, you have to go through rapid eye movement to dissipate some of the tensions of the day. And one of the things we've discovered is the more sleep deprived people are, the more psychotic they start acting. So this is one of the things that you have to do in order to maintain yourself, is to go through REM sleep, which dissipates some of the stress of the day. And if you don't do that, then the stress will become intense and the individual will become psychotic. But sometimes they don't come out of it. Sometimes they actually stay in a psychotic state. So stage 3 and 4 are the delta wave stages. These are what you need to repair yourself. The last stage is REM. So as far as Americans are concerned, we have 5 stages of sleep. 1 and 2 aren't very restful, but 3 and 4 are extremely restful. And then stage 5 dissipates your psychosis. It takes away all of that stress from the day. In stage 1 and 2, the individual is often not aware that they are asleep. They are unresponsive to the external environment, but they are seeing an environment. And so as far as they're concerned, that's where they are. A lot of times you'll wake up from falling asleep in class, and you'll think that you're out under a tree someplace at your grandparents' home that you haven't visited for 15 years or something. But you're not, of course, you're in class. Stage 3 and 4 is the most relaxing form of sleep. However, it is during these stages that most people will do if they are distressed about something. They may sleepwalk, or they may wet the bed. This is when you wet the bed. So sleepwalking and sleep talking take place in stage 3 and stage 4. Once upon a time, I told you the story about my wife stabbing me.
What?
She stabbed me while I was asleep. She was having an argument with, I can sleep with my eyes open, so she thought I was awake. I was trained to sleep with my eyes open when I was in the military. So I sleep with my eyes open a lot. Well, sometimes, I don't know, because I'm asleep, so I don't really know what's going on. But evidently I sleep with my eyes open. So theoretically I was saying something, and she got angry at what I was saying. She was trying to have an argument with me. And I was talking, evidently I was talking in my sleep. And who knows what I said. The next thing I know, I've got a knife in my chest. She's gone to the kitchen, she got a steak knife out of the drawer and stabbed me with the knife. But I was sleep talking, and she started screaming at me, "What? You were talking about your girlfriend." Well, I didn't have a girlfriend. I'm not exactly sure what I was talking about, or maybe it was wishful thinking on my part.
Which wife was that?
I'm sorry?
Which one was that?
That was number 1, wife number 1. The crazy one, she stabbed me. And she had actually stabbed me earlier in the day. In the evening, I came home and she had emptied our checking account. And I just gotten paid. In the military, at that time, you only got paid once a month. And I'd just gotten paid, and she emptied my checking account. Buying crap. It wasn't like she went to the store and bought food, or she bought clothes for the kids, or anything like that. It was like Tupperware, you understand. You have these Tupperware parties. Well, this was an Artex party. Artex was a paint thing. And so somebody had an Artex party, and she had spent all of our money on art supplies. As strange as that sounds. And of course we didn't have any food. Well, we had some food, but anyway. And I said, what have you done? And she grabbed a knife and she stabbed me in the arm. Unfortunately, the kids were awake, and my daughter jumped in between us, as strange as that sounds. And that she really didn't want to kill me. I think she was just mad. She was trying to, who knows what she was trying to do. She's a crazy lady. Anyway, so my daughter still talks about that to this day. The day her mother grabbed a knife and tried to stab her dad. As much fun as that is. My son is too small, he doesn't remember it. Okay, so I was asleep and I was sleep talking, and evidently I said something that offended her, and she decided that she would kill me. By plunging a knife into my chest. Luckily, she wasn't a very big person. She only weighed about 85 pounds. She was kind of a tiny little thing. And I don't know that she really wanted to kill me anyway, but the knife embedded in one of my ribs, and rather than going through and, of course, plunging into my heart. But it was right over my heart. She aimed really good. She did a good job. During REM, all movement is suspended. This is really kind of bizarre. The heart rate is increased, the blood pressure is up, the brain activity is at waking level. So if we look at REM, it looks an awful lot like beta waves. They're a little bit wider or farther apart, so they don't exactly look like beta waves. But you're really agitated at this point. And one of the things we're going to find out is during REM sleep, a lot of stress is produced. The most vivid dreams occur during this stage. Usually they're fantasies. They're putting things together that really shouldn't go together. One people's favorite dream is that they are adults and they are going back to where they lived when they were children, when they were babies. And so here they are running around with their parents, and their parents are the same age that they are. That's one of the favorites. And some of their brothers and sisters are little bitty people. This is a very popular type of dream that people have. If denied REM, the individual will they will start to act psychotic. And of course, that's what I was saying before. So we need to go into REM sleep to dissipate this psychosis that we are maintaining throughout our lives. That's what the sleep cycle looks like. You can see the most restful sleep that you have when you go into stage 4 sleep is right at the beginning of your sleep cycle. So that's the first 2 or 3 hours of sleep, maybe the first 4 hours of sleep, depending on how long you're going to be asleep. But you will go down into stage 4 sleep, and that's good. Okay, so since stage 4 is when we do our sleepwalking and sleep talking, we will go into stage 4 and we will sleepwalk and sleep talk right after we go to sleep. So it will be within the first 1 or 2 hours. Something else that happens to us can happen to us at this stage is night terrors. So sometimes we'll have bad dreams, and usually it will occur within the first 2 or 3 hours of going to sleep. The strange thing is that females do not have night terrors nearly as frequently as boys do. That is, so it's gender control. Females will have nightmares. Usually always a nightmare will occur at the end of the sleep cycle. They will occur just before they wake up. So nightmares occur here, and night terrors occur here or here. So a little boy is more likely to have night terrors where he wakes up. He wakes up screaming at the very beginning of his sleep cycle. Little girls will start screaming at the end of their sleep cycle. Right just before it's time to wake up, they will have a nightmare. Now, one of the interesting things about that is, if you're here, if you're here, you can't wake up. That's the bizarre part. You can't wake up. If you're here, you can wake up because you're about to wake up anyway. So you'll just go ahead and wake up. And of course, you remember your dream, and it's very vivid. This funny thing about, and that's not that funny, but the strange thing about night terrors are that you can't remember your dream because it happened at the beginning of your sleep cycle. As confusing as that is. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, one of my students, this is before she was my student, she was a freshman or sophomore in high school. She started walking through her house. She'd gone to bed, and about an hour after she went to bed, she started walking through the house screaming. So her father, who was a boxer and the size of a mountain, this guy was huge, weighed about 300 pounds, had arms the size of my legs. I mean, he was massive. And he was a boxer, and he'd never been knocked out. He had this huge jaw. Anyway, so he goes running toward his stepdaughter. She was his stepdaughter, trying to find out what the problem was. Well, evidently she was having a really strange dream where she was being attacked, and she was punching the wall, and she was slapping things, trying to get things to move away. And what he wanted to do, she was not very big, and he was as big as a mountain. He tried to get close enough to her so he could hug her. That's what he tried to do. Well, she saw him coming toward her, and whatever dream she was having, it was a monster coming toward her, and she punched him right at the jaw. She punched him in the jaw. And this guy had never been knocked out by a boxer, but his dog cold-cocked him, and she just dropped him right away. Well, the strange thing, well, that's not the strange part. So the other thing that happened was they sent her off to a mental institution because of this. Because she attacked her father. I think it was evidently what happened. I mean, it was how they interpreted things. And nobody interpreted this as her having a night terror, and she had no recollection of what happened. She knew nothing. So she woke up, and she was in handcuffs, and they were taking her to juvie. This is in Montana, so juvie was like 150 miles away. Anyway, she spent 2 years. She graduated from high school in juvie rather than where she was from. And she didn't go to high school for the last 2 years of her career. As sad as that is, and the father, of course, when the police got there, he was still knocked out. And this guy had never been knocked out before. And so they assumed that she attacked him in one way or another. And as far as they were concerned, there's nothing they could do about it. So they hauled her off to juvie, and she stayed there for 2 years. As sad as that is. And when we went over this in class, she said, you know, maybe, and then she told me her story. I'd never heard the story before, of course, but after we had talked about this in class, we started talking about it, and it turned out, yeah, that's exactly what happened. She had a night terror, and nobody even knew the difference between a night terror and a nightmare at that stage. You know, this is 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Anyway, everything turned out okay. She came back, and she was already doing drugs because she'd been in juvie for 2 years. But
did she just hit him right at the right spot, or is it because she was stronger?
Well, he's such a big guy. Usually he had his defenses up, and nobody really hit him. You know, they caught him on the cheek, or nobody had ever really popped him in the chin before. And she just hit him in the right spot. She was lucky she hit him in the right spot. And of course she was this tall and he was this tall. So when she swung from her shoulder, she caught him right on the chin and dropped him. Just the strangest thing in the world. Of course he was coming at her too. So he was kind of off balance when she hit him, and she just dropped him. And he was knocked out for about 2 hours. They thought she did a lot. They took him in and x-rayed his chin. Of course, he'd never been hit on the chin before. And she only weighed, 100 pounds, and he weighed 300 pounds. Anyway. And of course, they investigated to find out if he'd been molesting her. Because, a father with only his underwear on, and a daughter that's got just a nightgown on, it's the whole thing. So it got kind of ugly. Anyway, okay, so that's night terrors for you. As the night progresses, the length of time a person spends in REM will increase. And of course, this is necessary because we need to dissipate all of that stress that we've been through all day in order to maintain ourselves. And if that doesn't take place, then we will potentially have a psychotic episode. Dreams in REM in the first part of the night tend to be relatively realistic, while those toward the morning are longer and more vivid. So we dream about things that we've gone through in REM sleep, but we also dream about things that we have gone through in delta wave sleep. And we'll talk about that in just a second. People actually dream throughout the night with realistic dreams happening in the non-REM sleep and more vivid imagery happening during REM. One of the things we discovered from Vietnam, we had all of these individuals that were suffering from PTSD, and bad things were happening to them. And the reason bad things were happening to them is because they were trying to keep from reliving all these horrible things that had happened to them during combat. So one of the things we discovered was that in delta wave sleep, people dream about their memories. So it's their realistic dreams. And that usually happens right at the beginning of your sleep cycle. And since this was happening at the beginning of their sleep cycle, these individuals didn't want to go to sleep. So they were sleep deprived, or they used some kind of something to take care of these memories. Alcohol works, Marijuana works, heroin works. At the time we didn't have crystal meth, but we did have speed. So these guys would go on to get on speed so that they wouldn't go to sleep. And of course, if they went on speed and they stayed awake for 3 or 4 days, you can imagine what happens as far as your REM sleep and your psychosis are concerned. So that was a problem. They were getting so drunk that they were passing out. And when they did that, of course, they jumped over that delta wave and they went right into REM. So these guys were getting fall down drunk every night. And this is one of the things we discovered. So we started giving them a medication that made them skip over their delta wave sleep. But unfortunately, of course, if you don't have delta wave sleep, that's when you repair your body. So this is one of the things that we discovered was, we made them skip over their first stage of sleep and go right into their second stage of sleep, but they weren't getting enough rest. They weren't going into delta wave. They weren't dipping down into the very restful and very reparative delta wave sleep. So what was happening? That's it right there. Okay. So what was happening, instead of having 2 episodes where they were repairing their bodies, they only had 1 episode. I'm trying to think what that stuff was called. Deseron? Anyway, it was a SSRI that made them jump over that delta wave sleep. And it worked. It worked, but it didn't work. There were side effects. And the side effects were that their bodies were breaking down faster because they were taking this medication. And the reason it was breaking down faster was because they weren't repairing themselves like they should have been repairing themselves. As strange as that seems. Anyways, so here, the Vietnam War was in the 1970s. This was taking place with research in the 1980s and 1990s. And now, of course, we're much better at dealing with PTSD than we ever have been before. And it was almost like we were using Vietnam veterans as our experimental group to figure out how we were going to take care of people in today's society. And of course, we have all those Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans coming back, and they have PTSD, and of course, we have learned not to do this to them because potentially it will break down their bodies faster. Individuals who are depressed tend to have more dreams that are more intense than normal, and that is in REM sleep. It is thought that the excess dreaming is due to the state of hyperarousal from excess worrying, and of course that has to do with depression. Depression is a really confusing problem that we have a hard time dealing with. I already talked about night terrors that occur in stage 3 and stage 4, right at the beginning of your sleep cycle. Happens more to males than females. Like I said, it's almost impossible to wake up, and they don't remember anything. When I was 4 or 5 years old, no, I was 5 or 6 years old, I fell asleep in front of the television. My dad decided he was going to wake me up and walk me upstairs, and that's exactly what happened. He woke me up, but I didn't wake up. I was in stage 3 or stage 4 sleep, but I could move. It was like sleepwalking. And evidently, while he was taking me upstairs, I told him about all these amazing things, and he told me about it the next morning. And he said, I took you to the toilet and you peed. And evidently, I wasn't very good at urinating in the toilet, and I missed sometimes, or splashed, or something happened. Anyway, evidently, I hit right in the middle. So he praised me for being such a good aimer. Anyway, he told me about what I said, and I remembered nothing, absolutely nothing. Nightmares, of course, occur more to females than males. It happens during REM sleep. The dreams tend to be longer in duration and occur late in the sleep cycle when REM is more dominant. Can this be a problem? Usually, if somebody has night terrors or nightmares, it's because of something that's happening to them, something real that's happening to them, and they are more prone to nightmares and night terrors. So, I mean, people can have nightmares and night terrors without anything happening. Maybe they watched the wrong movie. Marius was telling me that he's got a 3-year-old. He's got a 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old begged him to take him through this haunted house. So they started walking through the haunted house, and it was a lot scarier than Marius thought it was going to be. Well, once you start in a haunted, you can't go back. So they had to go all the way through the house, and this kid was screaming bloody murder throughout the whole house. So he had to tried to rush through, and he got lost. You know, he went down the wrong alley. You know, that kind of thing happened. Poor Marius, and he's deathly afraid that he's scarred his child for life. It's funny, or not funny. Anyway, you know, that's the kind of thing that can cause nightmares. He has 2 older children, and one of them teases the other one by pretending to be Leatherface. Isn't he the Texas Chainsaw Murderer? Isn't that Leatherface? Anyway, he pretends that he's Leatherface, and the other kid just goes screaming through the house because he's afraid that the guy's going to rip his face off. And he has nightmares. Now, the interesting thing about that is because the reason he has them is because his brother's teasing him. So that's why he has nightmares. So potentially it has something to do with something that's happened. If a child watches a really bad movie. I remember one time when I was younger, when I was a child, my parents let me watch this movie about, it was about the Northwest Passage. It was this group of, this during the French and Indian War, and these guys got lost in the forest. And of course the natives, the eastern natives were chasing them and catching them and torturing them. So as long as they stayed as a unit, everything was fine. Well, not that fine. They were starving to death. But I remember during the movie, one guy has decapitated one of the people he's killed, and he's eating the head. He's eating the skull, not the skull. He's eating the meat off the skull. I know. So he's carrying this thing around in a bag, and eventually he goes insane because he's eating somebody's brains. So then he jumps off a cliff because they try to get it away from him, and he runs toward the cliff, and of course he can't stop. He doesn't know where the cliff, and so plunges to his death, holding on to this skull this decapitated head that he has. And then at another point, they were talking about they were playing. They saw the natives, and they were playing football with people's heads. And that night, of course, I had a dream about decapitated heads and whatnot, which is kind of funny. We're not funny at all. Evidently, I woke my dad up, and he was not happy. And of course, my mother was mad at my dad for letting me watch the movie. Oh well. I later watched all kinds of movies and I didn't have any problems, but at that time I had a problem. Humans at different ages sleep differently. Most infants do not develop stable sleeping patterns for several weeks after birth, and if you've ever had a child, you know that's exactly what happens. It takes them a while to figure out when night is. Some children are better than others. Females tend to regulate their sleep pattern much earlier than males do. Male children do. Males are the worst. And of course, this is one of the complaints my wife had. I had 2 children, one was a female and one was a male. My daughter regulated her sleep pattern after about 2 weeks. And my son, I'm not sure, well, he was a bartender. That's what he did later on. So his sleep cycle never was regulated. And this kid you never knew when he was going to be awake or when he was going to be asleep. Usually you woke him up just before it was time to go to school, and he would bathe the night before for school the next day. Of course, his hair was all over the place. But that's the only way we could get the kid to go to school, was to wake him up just before it was time to go to school. Funny kid. So we're still not sure his sleep pattern is regulated, and we're still not sure he's potty trained. So he's 45 years old, and we're still not sure he's potty trained. He's a funny kid. Mathematician. Of course, he's a mathematician. Premature infants may spend as much as 80% of their time, their sleep in REM. And if you've ever been around a premature child, of course, I used to work in a NICU, neonatal intensive care unit. They sleep all the time. They're hardly ever awake. But of course, most of their sleep isn't very restful. And they're not repairing themselves because you repair yourselves in delta wave sleep. So these kids are staying in REM sleep. And so that the startle reflex is extreme in them. So if you go to do something, draw their blood or whatever, change something, change their bed, you know, they're always all startled every time you touch them, every time you get close to them. Now the interesting thing was when I was working in Oklahoma, I was a lab tech, and I would go into I was the one that got to go into the NICU because I had so much expertise in the area. So I was in the NICU like half my work period was in NICU. And anytime I was in there, the they had them on heart monitors, and their heart monitors would go down. They liked my voice. It was really kind of odd. So if I put you to sleep, that's evidently there's something about my voice. And there was one kid that he was really fragile. He was real close to having a heart. He was a mess. He was just a mess. But every time there were two of us that if we started talking, his heart monitor went down. It's the only time his heart monitor went down. So his heart rate would start to normalize. I was one of them, and then there was another nurse. So as it worked out, we never worked together because when I was there, she wasn't. And when she was there, I wasn't there because we were the ones that could regulate this heart rate. Just with our voices, as strange as that seems. And of course, I would talk the entire time I was in there, and his heart monitor would go way, way down. For some reason, you know, she was a female. She did have a kind of a deep voice. Maybe I have a kind of a high voice. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, I quit. I mean, I left. I got another job, and baby died. So it's kind of my fault that the baby died. Died right after I left of a broken heart, evidently. So it's kind of tragic. Anyway, so premature infants are in REM sleep for about 80% of the time. And when you're in REM sleep, of course, you can hear. You can hear what's going on outside. You can't move, but you can hear. Full-term infant will spend about 50% of their night in REM. And as they get older, of course, the amount of time that they spend in REM will decline. REM sleep declines as people age, but it accounts for about 20% of our sleep in any average adult. And this is one of the reasons why older individuals don't sleep as long as other individuals do. Sleep deprivation studies have been conducted on subjects, and it was demonstrated that after a prolonged period of time, the individuals showed signs of hallucinations, irritability, spatial irritability, difficulty in concentration, and disorientation. But these symptoms seemed more pronounced in the morning and nearly absent in the late afternoon and early evening, as odd as that seems. So they were especially nutty and erratic and grouchy first thing in the morning. And later on, of course, as the day progressed and as they were spent more time awake, the symptoms dissipated. Sleep recovery, if this has ever happened to you, you had to pulled an all-nighter or whatever. Of course, the next day you're just tired as all get out, so you have to go to sleep. I was working in a concrete block factory, and for some reason we had an order that had to get out that night. So we worked all night. We were supposed to get off at midnight, but we worked all night and into the next day. With stacking concrete blocks. Actually, we're stacking concrete bricks, brick-sized concrete, chunks of concrete. It was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible night. But that day when I went to bed, I slept for 12 hours. So you do need to get it back. If you miss a sleep cycle, then you will recover. And it's really kind of interesting the way it works. You won't really spend an excess amount of time sleeping. And if you do, you feel bad. You don't really feel good, despite the fact that you have missed some sleep and now you need to recover from that. If you do try to spend more time in bed, you'll probably wake up after if you normally sleep for 8 hours, you will wake up after 8 hours. That's just not the way. That's just the way it works. You can't really, your body can't really prolong. You're not really asleep for 12 hours. That's not the way it works. You're usually asleep for your normal amount of time. You wake up, you kind of drift back into sleep, but then you wake up again after. It's like a nap. You have your sleep cycle and then you take little naps. And you can do that. That my wife does that. She can stay in bed for 11 or 12 hours, but she's not really asleep the whole time. She wakes up and it's like she takes short little naps. So what will happen if you miss a sleep cycle? You need to make up those 8 hours of sleep, but you can't really do it. It doesn't really work that way. The first night you'll spend more time in delta wave sleep. So it's really kind of interesting because you'll have these really, really strange dreams that deal with delta wave sleep because you're spending more time in delta wave sleep. Remember, delta wave sleep is more realistic. So the first night you'll spend more time in delta wave sleep. The second night you'll spend more time in REM sleep because you need to make that up as well. You'll go into REM sleep, and so this is the second night. Remember, this is the second night. So your recovery is going to take 2 days to recover. You miss one sleep cycle, it's going to take 2 days to recover from that. And if you don't, if you're not allowed to do that, of course, you become psychotic because you start having those symptoms of psychosis, the irritability, the hallucinations and whatnot. Yeah, this is the way it works. You trying to recover from your sleep deprivation. The basal forebrain and the back portion of the frontal cortex and the front of the hypothalamus are crucial to shortwave sleep. Neurons in the area are activated by sleep and use GABA as the neurotransmitter to inhibit other areas of the brain. Norepinephrine also inhibits this area. Now, normally we think of norepinephrine as an excitatory neurotransmitter, but in this case it's an inhibitory neurotransmitter, shutting things down in the area. The pons signals the brain to begin REM sleep. It is GABA and glycine in the pons that inhibits the motor neurons from reaching their action potential in the spinal column. Thus, during REM sleep, a sleeper's muscles aren't just relaxed, but flaccid they have complete loss of muscle tone. So while you're in REM sleep, you cannot move, you're paralyzed. You're completely paralyzed. Paralyzed to the extent that your muscles can't move. But your muscles actually, if you pick somebody's arm up, they would be completely, it'd be like you were, talk about being dead. But anyway, it's about the same thing because you have no muscle tone whatsoever. But you're still alive, of course, and you're still awake, or you're not awake, of course, but you're in REM sleep. But your muscles are completely flaccid. This is kind of bizarre. If you've ever had a dream where you were trying to wake up because something was happening in your dream, so you tried to wake up and you tried to wake up and you couldn't wake up, you couldn't force yourself to wake up, this is exactly what was going on. And usually, as soon as your REM cycle is done, you will wake up and you'll start moving and looking around for whatever it is that you were dreaming about. But has anybody ever had that? That happened to me one time. Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. I dreamed that I saw a ghost. And I tried to move and I couldn't move. He was standing right beside me and I couldn't move. And he was standing right there. And I couldn't move and I couldn't move. I was in my dorm room and I had slept on the upper level of the bunk beds, and his face was right here, and he was looking out the window, and his arms up like this. It was this guy in this other room, and he wasn't supposed to be in my room, and he shouldn't have been able to get in my room because the door was locked, so there's no way he could have gotten in. I had a key, and my roommate had a key, but my roommate was staying. He was a fraternity guy. He was staying in the fraternity. So this guy came into my room, and he stood in front of the door, and I recognized him. He was this kid from another dorm. I recognized him, and I wanted to talk to him, but I couldn't move my mouth, and I couldn't wake up. I was trying to wake up. I had my eyes, peeled on this guy, and I couldn't move, and he's sitting up there. I wanted to ask him what he was doing. So the next day, I thought, well, I'm going to talk to that guy and find out what was going on. What the hell he was doing in my room. He committed suicide 2 hours before I went to sleep. I don't know. It was really a ghost. Or was it? Maybe I knew that he was about to commit suicide, or maybe I sensed that he was about to commit suicide. Maybe his behavior was such that he put up the vibes that he was about to kill himself. And so when I had my dream, I dreamed that guy was there. Not knowing, of course, that he killed himself. But I had picked up on the fact that he was that depressed and that upset about getting bad grades. He got an F on something. And he thought they were going to kick him out of college. So he killed himself. He hung himself. And then he came his ghost came into my room. And stood there like forever. And I'm trying to talk to him and I can't talk. Anyway.
Well, he's a ghost, you don't need to talk, you just need to
I should have been able to mentally
talk to them.
communicate. I don't know. Is that the way ghosts work? All the ghosts that you've come in contact, you can use mental telepathy to communicate with. Anyway, I couldn't communicate with him. I couldn't move. I was scared. I was really scared. It was really kind of strange. I remember the fear because I usually don't get afraid. I'm not usually afraid of things. Of course, I was afraid of him for one reason or another. Reticular formation is a collection of systems whose activity creates states of cortical arousal. Activation produces heightened awareness and arousal. Damage produces comatose conditions. So if you damage, the reticular activating system formation is in the middle of your spinal column and moving up into your pons, of course, into the ancient part of your brain. Okay, so this is what wakes you up at night. If there's an emergency, you wake up. You smell smoke, you wake up. The baby cries, you wake up. The reality is that whether you've had children or been around children at all, if a child was in distress out in the hallway and he cried, we would all recognize it as a distressed cry, and we would all react to it. And that's our reticular activating system arousing us. We might all jump. We might all just sprint out the door, not thinking I need to go out the door, but just automatically moving toward that sound. And that is your reticular activating formation. Existence of different systems is indicative of the fact that there are different types of arousal, of course. Different components of reticular formation use different neurotransmitters. The locus ceruleus uses norepinephrine, and the raphe nuclei uses serotonin. Activity changes excitability of cortical neurons. Neurons are more active, more responsive to inputs, of course. This is why you wake up. You can sleep through, a party, and all of a sudden the baby starts crying. And there's all this other noise, and you pick that baby's cry out, and you wake up. This can happen to you late at night. You're asleep, and it's completely quiet outside, and all of a sudden a cat screams about something. And you wake up. Have you ever been asleep and all of a sudden, and you heard somebody yell your name and you woke up? Has that ever happened to you? Yeah. Weird. It's weird, is it? It's part of your dream, actually, is what's going on. Nobody's outside yelling your name. Probably, I don't know. Anyway, so it's the reticular activating formation that is what takes place. And there you can see where it is. That whole red portion is the reticular activating formation. The RAF. Sleep conserves energy. Sleep allows animals to be inactive when their major predators are active, and that's what happened with us humans. The predators that potentially would attack us were large cats. You would think that we would be afraid of cats. Well, we are afraid of lions and mountain lions and whatever. But you'd think that these were our natural predators. Bears, bears can kill a human. So you would think that we would be more afraid of these. Of course, you can die from a spider bite. You can die from a snake bite. And of course, you can't tell the difference between a good snake and a bad snake. You can't tell the difference between a good spider and a bad spider. So you just step on all of them. You just try to kill them all. Sleep does restore your body, so it's necessary to sleep. If you are not sleeping well, then it is difficult for you to maintain your muscle mass, to maintain your organs, in essence. Sleep aids memory consolidation. Consolidation of material learned while awake, of course, that's the memories that you're trying to consolidate. So the reality is, if you want to put something in your long-term memory, one of the things that you need to do is take a nap. So if you're cramming for a test, and you've got pieces of information in there that you want to put in your long-term memory, you have to go to sleep before that goes into your long-term memory. That's just the way it works. So the best thing to do is, if you're going to cram, is go ahead and cram, but then get a good night's sleep. And probably what will happen is the next day you'll have all that in your long-term memory. It's in there someplace, and all you need to do is find the cue and pick it out. Sleepwalking takes place in stage 3 and stage 4 sleep. It usually lasts for only a few minutes, and the individual is unaware of the episode took place. Once upon a time, my brother woke me up one night. It was a full moon night, and of course this was in Indiana, so we had a lot of dew on the ground. Indiana is a very moist area, so there was dew on the grass. This was when the dandelions were out, if you know what a dandelion is. So my brother woke me up. He walked past the door, and so I decided I would follow him for some ungodly reason. I followed him out, and he went outside. And he sat down in his pajamas in the middle of a dandelion patch, a dandelion circle. And he sat down in this thing, in the middle of it, and he sat there for about 15 minutes. And of course, I'm following him, and like an idiot, I got off the porch and I was walking out in the grass. Well, I had my pajamas on too, so my pajama legs were getting wetter and wetter and wetter. I mean, it's wet. I mean, that's a lot of water. And this guy's sitting right in the middle of this dandelion patch. After about 15 minutes, he got up and went back up and got in bed. So here I am. I'm soaked up to my knees in dew. So I reached, my brother got into bed and didn't say a word. He just walked, and he sat in the middle of that dandelion patch, and he got back in bed. And I reached over and grabbed his leg, or touched his leg, to see how wet he was. He wasn't wet at all. He sat in the middle of that dandelion patch in all that dew. It's like sitting in a puddle of water. I mean, it's that bad. And it wasn't wet at all. Can you do that? Is that possible? And I was soaked all the way up to my knee. I had to change my pajama bottoms. Now, how did that happen? Is that possible? Yes, it is possible, because if we generate enough heat, we can dry out our clothes. And that's actually what happens. If you've ever been outside and you got all wet, and you came inside and all of a sudden, you know, it only took like 2 or 3 minutes before your clothes were completely dry. It's because you're radiating all this heat, and the heat, of course, is dissipating all the water. It's drying out all the water. And that's what happened with him. He was putting off so much heat that he stayed dry, as odd as that seems. Anyway, that's sleepwalking. How much time do we have? Oh, 2 minutes. Enuresis is wetting the bed. It happens to children. Usually happens to them until they go through puberty. Normally they will, all this will go away after they go through puberty. This is very common in boys. It's relatively common in boys. So they're more likely to wet the bed than little girls are. It tends to run, it's genetic, so it tends to run in families. So if a father was a bedwetter, then potentially his son will be a bedwetter also. One method of reducing incidence of bedwetting is a nasal spray of vasopressin, which reduces the amount of urine that accumulates during the night, and they're less likely to wet the bed. Strangely enough, gastric ulcers, researchers have discovered that we have the gastric ulcers are worse during REM sleep. Sufferers of gastric ulcers will secrete 3 to 20 times more acid during REM as a normal person does. Okay, it's time to quit. So sorry about that. I mean, it's really kind of sad. So if you're somebody that has ulcers, yeah, okay, you feel your stress during REM sleep, and of course that's at the end of